All right. So where we left this session was a discussion about repository. That repository is a in-memory collection, and we should really have another pattern which is doing the persistent work for us. When there are two repositories, we can bind them together, make them part of one single pattern or one single object, and that object is called unit of work. Now, the most important responsibility of unit of work is to either commit, which is going to persist the data, or to roll back, which is going to undo the effect because something went wrong at the time you were saving that persisted data. All right, so we require...
Hey, G, I just transaction.
Sure. Rajat, you're saying something.
I was saying this like the transaction. I said transaction earlier.
You said that? Okay. Kudos to you. All right. Somebody else was saying something too.
Hey, Jia, this is Bhaskar. I just missed the start of this unit of work. Can you just...
No. So all we said is that the repository is an in-memory collection.
Yep.
All right. And then we should not be doing persistent using the repository pattern, because there could be like multiple repository student courses and instructors probably, right? And then we want to persist the changes because they are connected together. They're all part of one page. And when we want to persist, we want to rely on another binding object, which is the unit of work. And then if you read through the definition, maintains a list of objects affected by a business transaction. All right, and coordinates the writing out of changes and resolution of concurrency problem. All right, so in case any problem happens, unit of work is going to say, hey, roll back. All right, and then if everything is fine, it is just going to persist that data to some other data source. So that is the purpose of unit of work. And unit of work with repository, you should always have a unit of work sitting somewhere.
Understood. Yeah.
All right, awesome. So let's just start making a list of activities that we have to do. So far we identified that the home controller is violating SIP, the DIP, because it has school context. We're going to get rid of that. We already got rid of some dead code from the about function. Inside the about action, we are going to get rid of the database dependency, right? We are going to instead use the repository and the unit of work. All right, so that's about the about function. That's going to become our to-do list very soon. After which the data is getting assigned to another class object. Now notice that this class object has a direct one-to-one mapping with the columns that are getting selected here. So it is called enrollment date group. I don't know why somebody would call it enrollment date group, but they call it that. So a null date and followed by a student count. A better way of doing such things is that you have a stored procedure inside probably some SQL server somewhere, and then through the repository you say that, hey, get me student enrollment data, and then that repository is going to fulfill this request here, and you are directly going to get or receive this particular object. Now this object, if I press F12 and go to the definition, it is part of the view model. Now this is a good design, that anything that is interacting with the UI should be part of the view model classes. All right, so I would appreciate that while they were demonstrating entity framework, they took care of creating view models the right way. So this is the good thing about the application. It is doing a to list to this particular data, right, which was enumerable. Question to you guys is that, would you write to list in your application?
No, it's not recommended actually.
Okay. In what cases would you write it?
I think when the data has been written from the repository, and if you wanted to work on certain collection, for example, if you want to iterate over the certain collection, or do you want to certain manipulations,
sure,
at that point you can work on lists.
Sure. The only case I have found to list useful is when the left hand side is an iQueryable. All right, an iQueryable is going to execute the pending queries, and then it is for the first time going to reach out to database and going to fetch the result of the query that is getting formed in line. But for an enumerable, doing to list is Not a very good idea. So let's just start there. Let's just delete this. Okay, this is redundant code. This is slowing our application down. All right, moving on. Contact page is pretty standard. I'm pretty sure that this is hard-coded details of the people. All right, let's talk about the last function inside home controller, the dispose function. What do you guys notice? What is specifically stand out about this function?
I don't think so. Is it? It's required at this stage.
Okay.
Because anyways, these are all managed objects, right? Anyways, garbage collector will take care of.
Sure, but then somebody is specifically calling db.dispose. How do you decide that a dispose function call is required? Or what is it that you can do to get rid of this particular dispose function?
Generally, we would dispose of external resources.
External resources. What do you mean by that?
In our case, this is the database. Could be one potential candidate. Another could be file system if we are writing to file,
So
or any other resource.
Sure. So dispose is specifically for releasing unmanaged resources. All right, the resources that have some form of dependency on C++ or low-level operating system implementations. All right, where is this dispose function coming from? The iDisposable interface. So if I come here and hit F12, I'm taken to the DB context class, and then this is the dispose function. All right, notice that it is implementing an iDisposable. Some indication that DB context internally is using some operating system resources which are unmanaged, and that's why they have this dispose function here. What will make things even clear is looking at the implementation of dispose. Now, pressing F12 like this is not going to show me the internal implementation. How can I see that? Where can I see what is written inside dispose? One of the greatest tools that you can probably download and use as developers is ILSpy. All right, so I have that tool downloaded already. Let me go ahead and move it to the desktop that I'm using. All right, so I have that tool downloaded already, and I have included Entity Framework. Because Entity Framework is coming from a hard-coded path of our solution, notice that it is C drive code. All right, I had to manually add it. But if I come here and type db context like so, and I specifically select type, notice that down at the bottom it is displaying a class inside system data entity. Double click and expand and switch to dispose. All right, this dispose function is not doing anything fancy besides calling another protected virtual function. All right, if I go to the definition of that, I see that there is something called as internal context. When I go inside this function, there is not much that I'm seeing, but it is part of this particular class is eventually going to use a lot of operating system resources inside its implementation. If you scroll through, probably you will identify why this thing is implementing a dispose function exactly that way. All right. The reason I'm walking you through this code is because as part of refactoring, I mean, sometimes we can get a little too aggressive. All right. Every decision that we make that, hey, I want to get rid of this dispose probably because it is redundant, right? And I don't actually need it. That decision could be wrong, right? And then you just randomly don't go about deleting code from your application. You should not do that. One way I can think of getting rid of this variable is if I go to the definition of DB and look at the usage of the new keyword. Question to you guys. Who owns the lifetime of an object? Or who should call dispose on an object like this, on an object DB? I know I'm not putting the question the right way, so I'm just going to give away the answer unless somebody wants to attempt. Yes, sir, go ahead.
The scope in which it is being used?
the scope in which it is being used. I did not get the answer. Do you want to add more to it?
I mean, if you want to get rid of dispose, I can use using scope, and it will automatically call the dispose.
But how? Because this
No,
is
no,
a
it's a
class
member.
level
It's a
variable.
member. So when home controller gets destroyed, it will destroy.
Exactly.
Right.
But we don't control the home controller,
You don't.
right?
So the runtime does that. And,
Right.
But usually, in such kind of scenarios, let's say if you are using session level object, you're using DI, DB context object can be persisted across
Right.
one request cycle rather than just
My
class.
my answer is pretty straightforward, right? Let's get rid of this line from over here for like very short time. Let's change this to say var and cut and come inside. All right. Now in the hindsight, we saw another refactoring technique that a database or an object should live very close to where it is getting used. All right, I think I'll have to put it inside. I'm forgetting a syntax where you can directly use using statement on something else. Probably it requires declaration somewhere else. But if I move the definition or the creation of the DB object closer to where it is getting used, I think I'm all set. Right? This using statement right on line number 34 is going to call dispose function. And as soon as I do that, this line is gone. Right? And when this line is gone, probably this function is gone too. Right? So I don't really have to call that. Make sense? Alright, now there's something wrong with the syntax, so I can just come here and return here. Now it looks better, correct? So alright, so we saw some refactoring that we can get rid of functions and start cleaning up our code by moving things closer to where they are actually getting used. Make sense?
What's the day? Issue?
Alright.
What's the day?
So at this point we have at least identified the activities that we have to do for the activities that we have to do inside the home controller. Alright, now let's take a look at another controller and then we are actually going to get started with the refactoring